Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Pearson Edexcel International GCSE Languages Training event. This is the first of a two-part event, and the second part will be on Wednesday morning at the same time. And this is a welcome to Pearson. We're looking at French, German, and Spanish, although most of the examples that we use will be French. I noticed in the chat there was already a question about whether the training is going to be recorded. I believe it is, and I believe that you will have a copy of that. We're just admitting the final few people now, and as soon as we're ready, we've got everybody, we'll make a start. Okay, so it's 9 o'clock. We'll get going. So just a welcome this morning to Pearson. The session agenda today really is the welcome. We're going to talk about the content and planning of the course. We'll talk about assessment and mark schemes, and we'll also talk about support that may be available to you. My name's Tim Guilford, so I'm going to be with you through this session and also the session on Wednesday. I'm presenting on my own today, so I'll monitor the chat as much as I possibly can, but we'll try and allow some time for questions at the end. So if I haven't noticed a question that you've put there, or you'd like me to pick up on something later on, I'll do that at that point, and rather than interrupt as we go along. But so just if your question didn't get asked, jot it down, please, and do just ask me again at the end. In terms of our aims and objectives for the session today, you're going to really talk about identify how the qualification's devised and the fundamental documentation. We'll look at reviewing the content of the qualification, exploring how to plan the course and or lessons in some aspects, understand the assessment of the qualification and how to prepare students, and also identify the support available from Pearson. So I'm going to just ask you now very briefly in the chat if you would just drop in which languages you're currently teaching. So it'd just be good to French, Spanish, or German. Which languages are you teaching? And the poll should appear on your screen there. That's lovely. So yeah, predominantly French. Also seeing some good number of Spanish and some Germanists as well. Okay, right. Thank you. We'll end that poll now. So I think we can close that. And let's just move on. So it gives us a bit of context, really. And would also like to know, are you teaching the current Edexcel International GCSE specification? So I think you can type a yes or no there, and the poll 2 will pick up on that. Okay. Thank you. That's sort of interesting, really. We've kind of got a 60-40 split. More people not teaching the current spec than the other. Okay, all right. Thank you, and we'll just end that one as well. Okay, lovely, good. Thank you. That gives me a bit of context today. And we'd also like you just to tell us your main reason for attending today. So if you could, again, that poll 3 will enable you to say what it is you're particularly interested in today. So can we have poll 3? Or even just drop your message into the chat. That would be fine as well. Okay, so people looking for presumably an overview and some more information. Okay, right. So we'll just sort of do the little bit of welcome to Pearson and talk a bit about, in a way, kind of what you're joining if you're a new joiner. We're one of the world's leading learning companies, and we're UK based, one of the UK's largest awarding organisations as well. And we've got an international heritage that stretches back over 150 years. And today we partner with schools, universities, and employers worldwide, offering world-class, globally recognized qualifications to over 3.5 million students every year. So we're a trusted and recognized qualifications partner to 6,500 schools and colleges globally. And incredibly, we mark over 10 million, I'm sorry, exam scripts on behalf of the UK Department of Education each year. And also we're operating in 70 countries. So that's for people new to Pearson Edexcel, this is kind of the context of the organization that you're joining. We're going to think a little bit now about the content and planning of the courses. So we're going to aim to what we want students to be able to do, really, and these are the sort of big picture elements of what we need our students to be able to do by the end of the course. So they need to understand and use written forms of the target language in a range of familiar and practical contexts, and for a variety of purposes. And when we say purposes in terms of written forms, we maybe mean they need to write articles, they maybe need to write a blog post, they maybe need to write a letter. So when we talk about purposes, that's what we mean. We need students to understand and use spoken forms of the target language in a range of familiar and practical contexts, and also, again, for a variety of purposes, and those we will look at when we look at the speaking test. Students need to communicate effectively in the target language through the written word using a range of vocabulary and structures, and they need to communicate effectively in the target language through speaking using a range of vocabulary and structures. So in those productive skills, we're looking for the range of vocabulary and the range of structures. When we say range, for example, we mean a variety of different structures rather than constantly repeating the same structure over and over again. So as teachers are sort of thinking about planning, we're maybe looking to develop that range of structures and also develop the range of vocabulary. Perhaps watching out, for example, for overused vocabulary, words like problem that could actually be replaced by challenge or difficulty, for example, are sort of ways that range of vocabulary might be developed. We're asking students to develop knowledge and understanding of the target language grammar and its practical application. We're asking them to develop knowledge and understanding of countries and communities where the target language is spoken, so to have some sense of the cultural background to the French, Spanish, and German that they are learning, although that is not assumed in the tests and it's not directly tested. But it does enable students to understand context quite often within reading or listening activities that is helpful to them. So in terms of things like the names of places and major festivals and that sort of thing. So the key idea is that that's the backdrop for the specification, but it won't be directly tested. They would never be expected to write a blog about Easter in Spain that tested knowledge and understanding of those target language communities. Okay, so that's an important bit just to kind of keep in mind. It is also a specification that should develop positive attitudes towards modern foreign language learning, and also enable students to acquire a suitable foundation for further study. Now, if we look at the sort of exams that they do, there are 3 parts to the assessment. Paper 1 is listening, and it's a 30-minute test. And for those of you who are new to this, you don't need to do any pausing or anything. The recording will play for 30 minutes. All of the time allowed for pauses and writing and everything is recorded on the recording. So it's a 30-minute recording. Students answer in a written form or by ticking boxes. We'll have a look a little later at the format of that. And they also have 5 minutes reading time before they start the test. So this enables them to read through just to check that in each case they know what to do. And so again, this is something that as you're sort of developing those listening skills, you might want to look at how each of the different tasks works and teach students what it is they would usefully do in those 5 minutes to make sure that they are prepared to answer the questions in the context of each different question type. There are 40 marks for paper 1. And there are 7 tasks, and each task is based on a single recorded text. So seven tasks. Okay, and that's worth 25% of the total international GCSE. Now, paper 2 is reading and writing. So reading and writing for the international GCSE are part of the same paper, and it's 50% of the total international GCSEs, with 40 marks for reading and 40 marks for writing. And paper 3 is an 8 to 10 minute test. For speaking, it's again 40 marks and again worth 25%. So you see overall, each of the 4 skills is worth 25%, just that we have paper 2 with reading and writing, which tests 2 skills during the same paper. Now, if we just begin to think a bit about topic content, the topic content is organized into these 5 overarching themes, which are home and abroad, education and employment, personal life and relationships, the world around us, and social activities, fitness and health. And within each of those overarching themes, we see sub-themes. So, for example, in theme B, education and employment, sub-themes are school life and routine, school rules and pressures, school trips, events and exchanges, work, careers and volunteering, and also future plans. So for teachers, this is a very good guide to the content that you should teach in terms of vocabulary, but also perhaps for productive tasks, for speaking and for writing, the ideas that you might want students to talk about. School life might include things like homework and attitudes to homework, for example. And if we look at things like daily routines and helping at home, what students do and how they help at home. So just making sure that for each of those sub-themes, students have a useful range of vocabulary, and also that they have a good sense of how to deal with those themes. Now, you'll notice as well within these themes, some of them have an asterisk. So in theme A, services has an asterisk. In theme C, role models and childhood has an asterisk. In theme D, weather and climate has an asterisk. And in theme E, accidents, injuries, common ailments and health issues has an asterisk. This is also useful information for you as teachers, because what we don't do is ask students to write or speak about those topics. So those are not going to be tested because they might be very sensitive issues in the lives of certain students. So those things, those topics will come along in reading and listening, where we set the papers and we control the content so that we know that no distress is likely to be to be generated, if you like, by dealing with those. But you can see, for example, can't you, in topics like weather and climate, this is an international qualification. So if there's been a particularly sort of severe weather event in a particular area, we don't want to ask students to talk or write about those things. So that's the point of those asterisks in that list. Now, we're going to just sort of talk to you a little bit about using the specification and the sample assessment materials. Now, the specification is a key document you need to read before you start to teach the course, and do make sure that you've read the whole of the specification all the way through, and that you've kind of got to grips with that. And the specification also outlines the key content, the assessment, and the core objectives of the course. So that's really the starting point for developing your schemes of work and your programs of study. The SAMs, or the sample assessment materials, these are also very important documents. And they're the first set of assessments that are written by examiners. So it's worth, I think, keeping in mind that there will be books and resources and textbooks and things that are out there, that are published. But the thing that we are asking you to teach and the things that we are expecting to assess will be based on the specification and the format of the sample assessment materials. And as the spec moves forward, of course, you know, past papers as well. So I think it's just important to keep in mind that although something might be in some published resources, or even if it's an accredited resource, that's a useful teaching resource, but what's actually required for teaching and assessment is the specification and the sample assessment materials, which are a guide to what the actual exams will look like. And that's this comment, that's that little bit at the end. Both the specification and the SAMs form the basis for all live examinations. So just again, make sure you download and read these two documents. There are resources here with the training today that you can download. Okay, so we're going to move on now. We're going to have a think about, having sort of looked at the bigger picture, we're going to start to think about the listening tests specifically today. So this is paper 1, and you'll remember that we said it was worth 25% of the total. There are 7 listening extracts, so 7 separate recordings. And they're drawn from a variety of sources. They will have come from an authentic source. They will be based on an authentic source, but they are actually recordings done by actors in a studio. So the speed and delivery, it will be controlled so that we can allow our students to have access. But somewhere in the background, there will have been a YouTube video or an authentic source that's been quite heavily adapted, which was the basis of the extract. So these listening extracts might be short statements, they could be monologues, and they could be dialogues, 2 or 3 speakers. They're taken from a range of different situations, but crucially, they all relate to those general topic areas. So that list of things that we looked at, that's what will be the content of the listening exam, and it won't step outside that. It won't be anything that moves outside that area. So in terms of vocabulary that you teach and what we would require students to do and to know, that's where we're going to be. And in common with what I saw, in line really with what I said earlier on, the listening extracts don't require any specialist or technical target language vocabulary or detailed specialist knowledge of the topics. So everything our students need to answer, and this is also true for reading, will be contained within the recording. So we won't make any assumptions that you know things about Christmas in Germany or Easter in Spain or the geography of France, for example. There will be no assumptions made. If some knowledge is required, it will be there in the recording. So it will only test comprehension of the recorded material. It doesn't test anything beyond that. And one task is used with each listening extract. Now, in terms of skills, there are also some skills that, so that's the format of the exam, but there are also some skills that students need to develop in order to deal with this exam. So they need to be able to identify and note the main points. So the big picture, they need to be able to extract specific details. And keep in mind that specific details are not necessarily specific words, but they will be small phrases in isolation. So vocabulary clearly is very important, but the test is, as it moves forward, increasingly unlikely to test specific items of vocabulary in isolation. What it will actually do is test comprehension at phrase level. They also need to be able to identify points of view. Think about, if a person says, "I laughed a lot," they are feeling happy. So they may be able to need to do things like that, recognizing attitudes, emotions, and opinions. They will also need to deduce the meaning of some words from the context. We have a vocabulary list, but not every word that students are going to need to deal with this test will be on that list. But for example, if they have a list of different fruits and they hear apple and banana and strawberry, they've got a context for that. If they then hear the name apricot, which is maybe a fruit that wasn't on the list, from that they will be able to deduce the meaning of that, or they may be able to deduce the meaning of a verb or an adverb as well. So that idea that they don't need to understand absolutely everything, and of course not absolutely everything is needed for them to be able to answer all of the questions. Not every word is actually tested. And of course, this means, therefore, that they need to show some sort of understanding, sometimes of some unfamiliar language. So just to sort of talk about where you can find the listening extracts, you can find the sample assessments and specimen papers. You'll find the summer 2023 papers, the past papers, and also GCSE listening materials as well. Keep in mind that Pearson also produces GCSEs for the national, the English and English exams, and so sometimes there are materials there that you could use and reuse. And so do make sure that you kind of go to the website and that you're familiar with finding those listening extracts that are available. And we've also provided on the PowerPoint, which you'll have a copy of, some useful websites and sources that you might like to explore and use. And in particular, those things like the news in slow French, slow German, and slow Spanish are really nice things that are kind of kept up to date there, so that you've got something that you can sort of use on a regular basis with your students to develop further those listening skills. So we're just going to sort of think a little bit about some possible activities now for listening skills. So we might want to do an "Are you listening carefully" type activity. So we could ask 3 students to go to the front of the class, choose a topic, for example, holidays, and the rest of the class need to ask the students at the front questions in the target language on this topic. Where did you go on holiday last year? What was the best thing about your holiday? Which type of holiday would you most like to go on? Okay, so they practice. Are you listening carefully? Are you listening? Are you picking up the question? Then make a note of some of the answers. And once the group's asked, for example, 5 questions of each student, each of the 3 students, divide the group into small teams and ask them to put their hand up if they know the answer to some of the questions that you're going to ask in the target language. You know, which student went walking in the Swiss Alps? What was the best thing about Fred's holiday? Which student would love to go skiing? And then you can give a point for each team that answers correctly. So again, this is a sort of activity that can be replicated in all sorts of different ways, different formats. But are we listening carefully? Are we picking out the detail? Are we picking up the gist? And this will enable students to sort of develop not only their listening skills, but also their speaking skills. And of course, those 3 example questions that you saw at the beginning are the sort of thing that you might also use for speaking. So again, possible activities for listening skills. This is about identifying points of view and recognizing attitudes, emotions, and opinions. So you'd get students to work in pairs. So student A talks in the target language about a place that he'd like to visit or something that he or she would like to eat, but giving only subtle hints about the specific place or the food. And then student B will have to pick up on these subtleties and at the end recommend somewhere or something suitable for the speaker based on his or her explanation. And speaker A then confirms or rejects the usefulness of the suggestion and gives reasons. So then from there, students can discuss how they identified and used appropriate cues to help them infer and recognize preference, opinions, viewpoints, etc. Okay, so again, think about how you can develop those through speaking, develop those comprehension skills as well. Very much the specification pulls together skills. Although we test the skills separately, they don't necessarily need to be taught and developed in isolation. Okay, good. So we're going to move on now. We're going to have a think about the reading paper. So the reading paper has 5 tasks, and each one is based around a collection of short texts or a longer single text. And there's a different task type for each stimulus text. And this is where we say, well, actually, sometimes you tick a box, sometimes you write in a word, sometimes you write a longer answer, etc. The reading tasks come from a range of authentic, factual and non-factual written material, and they're of varying length. And the texts are written in different registers and contexts, and they will also, again, come from different sources. So they might be from websites, they might be from magazines, they might be, in one case, from a literary text. We also have a literary text as well. But again, these texts are very heavily adapted and abridged from the authentic source to bring them to the appropriate level for the students. I think it's worth mentioning as well that both for the listening paper 1 and for paper 2 for developing reading, there is a sort of ramped approach across the qualification and across the assessment rather. So we start off with the easiest task and we move up increasingly to the most difficult task. So those of you who might have come from other exam boards, you might have seen a different pattern of differentiation, but the sort of design for the Pearson Edexcel qualification is that it starts easy and progresses in difficulty through each of the papers, and this is also true for for the speaking paper, for the listening paper as well. So, as I said, there's one short extract from a literary text that the texts will have been adapted and abridged. And those literary texts could involve things like letters, short stories, novels or plays, contemporary historical sources, and so on. But the key thing is that they will be adapted and abridged to bring them to the appropriate level for the students. It's also important. Sometimes I think people miss the fact that those literary texts as well will also fit into that topic list that we looked at earlier on. So they are also part of the specification, you see. So they will definitely fit in there, and they will fit into that topic area list. Okay, so in terms of the vocabulary and so on that you've developed for dealing with each of those areas of the topic list, these will fit in. And for reading, then, the skills that we're developing are quite similar to the skills that we're developing for listening. We need students to identify and note the main points. We need them to extract some specific details, again, identify points of view, recognize attitudes, emotions, and opinions. We would ask them to deduce the meaning of words from context, and also show some understanding of unfamiliar language, and very much in the same vein as we saw for listening. So the same skills there. One thing I think it's important just to keep in mind, though, of course, is that listening requires memory as well. For reading skills, students have the text in front of them, and they can look as many times as they want. So they're looking at the language. For listening skills, memory is required. So those activities that we were talking about specifically for listening are really useful for helping students develop this memory. Are we listening carefully, and are we also absorbing that? Students are allowed to make some notes as well as they go through the listening paper, so how that note taking works. And also one of the things that it sort of differentiates listening from reading in terms of comprehension is that sort of requirement to deal with the phonics, with the sound system of the language. It's interesting, I think, that if you take care to make sure that your students' pronunciation is good when they speak, because if they can pronounce correctly, they can listen correctly. If they mispronounce words, that means that when they, because that's the sound that they have in their head, when they hear that word in a listening comprehension, maybe they won't be so likely to recognize it, or at least not so likely to connect it with the written word. Okay, so just then to talk a little bit about some where you can find some practice reading text. So obviously we've got the SAMs and the specimen papers. We've got summer 2023 papers and past papers there, and also GCSE reading papers and GCSE literary texts activities. So do make sure that you look at the English, the national GCSE specifications as well. It's also worth remembering that the GCSE in England is changing, so it's a good idea to grab those things and download them while they're there, because they may disappear from the website in the next 18 months or so as the new English GCSE steps in. So just kind of grab those things. And there's also within the PowerPoint presentation a list of, well, we think some useful sources that you might like to have a look at for French, Spanish, and German, to find some useful and helpful reading texts. So we're going to just have a little bit of a think about the possible activities for reading skills now. So just thinking about some of those, we looked at that list of skills, and I think it's important you kind of look at the list of skills and you think about the activities that you could use in the class to develop those skills. Sometimes reading and listening, reading in particular, can be a bit of an unloved skill because we just think, okay, well, we can give them a text and some questions for some homework as a sort of almost an activity to kind of keep them quiet and keep them busy and keep them doing something, and we're not necessarily looking at it as a skill that students need to develop. But I think it's important to remember that it isn't something that just automatically takes care of itself. It just won't. So you need to think about that list of skills that we saw a couple of slides ago, and think about how you develop those specific skills and develop activities for dealing with those skills. So, for example, the identify and note the main points. That's one of the skills that's listed. So we'd get students to skim read a text once without stopping for unfamiliar words, sounding out the words in their heads as well without vocalizing. That developing that inner voice is an important bit of developing reading skills. Again, in order to sort of develop language skills, we really need to connect the written and the spoken language together. Of course, we'd all love to have, so much classroom time that you could do everything orally, and then once everything was solid and the speaking and listening was good, only then would we read and write. But of course, we know that in the practical, in the real world, we do an awful lot of language learning from a written source, don't we? From a textbook, from a text, and we move into that sort of writing bit almost simultaneously with the speaking and listening. And so anything that you can do that develops that connection between the written and the spoken language is really important. So we'd say students would skim read and they just read it to themselves in their head. And then students answer the questions who, what, when, where, why. Okay, so what can we find from the text that answers those questions? Or they might match headings or subtitles that you provide to paragraphs. Okay, so you might, if paragraph 3 talks about pets, okay, pets would be one of the subheadings, and they would say, where do I find information about that? That's in paragraph 3, or line by line if it's a shorter text. And they can also complete sentences with a gap fill task designed to address the overall theme of the text. And then maybe we also pick up on another skill, things like extracting specific details. So again, scanning allows students to search a text for a particular piece of information. For example, the date of an historical event or the time a train is leaving. So students need to identify and highlight words or phrases or synonyms or antonyms for particular words as directed by the teacher. So again, you could give them a list of, time, date, place, so on, and would ask them to scan through and just find those specifically, find where those details are in the text. When we do the exam texts, all of the questions for listening and reading will go in the order that the information appears in the text. And that's fine in a way when that's how examiners set those questions. But of course, as examiners, as teachers, we know where the answers are, but the students don't necessarily know where the answers are. So that ability to scan through and find information, find where the details are, not necessarily even understand them immediately, is a useful exam skill that can be developed. So let's sort of pick up on another one then. And again, this is from the list of those skills. Identify points of view and recognize attitudes, emotions, and opinions. So here, for example, we might think about using simple context clues that can help students start to understand implied viewpoints and attitudes. For example, I love my job. I go to school every day and I help my students to learn French. The questions might be, what am I? How do I feel about my job? Okay, so, students here would be deducing that the person is likely to be a teacher. And also, how do I feel about my job? Well, positive would be an inference there, wouldn't it? Likes it, positive about it. And of course, as students progress, the context clues can become more challenging. And you can do this also at a very simple level with, perhaps a list of, things that people like to do. I like to go to the cinema, and you read out, or you show them a list of other sentences that would match with the I like to go to the cinema. I enjoy films, therefore I like to go to the cinema. Okay, I love fashion, therefore I like to go to the shops, and so on and so on. So inference is not necessarily complex. It's not necessarily at the highest level, but it's important that students understand that this skill is going to be required both in listening and reading, and that it's an important skill to develop. So detective stories, short mystery stories, or whodunit stories can also be really useful for developing this kind of reading skill. And students might read the extracts or text closely and use the clues they find to think critically about what's both in and not in the text. And this will improve their ability to infer from what they've read. Always, of course, in developing these skills, it's helpful to, as we saw with the speaking crossover with listening, to develop these skills by sometimes getting the students to write something with some clues in, and swap them over and get other students to pick out what the clues are, to answer some questions where the answer isn't there. One of the things that sometimes worries students when the questions are inference-based is that they think that the answer isn't there. But actually, just that awareness that you will need to gather together clues from the context in order to answer those questions, just the fact that they know that they might have to do that, and particularly later on in the reading and listening papers, can be helpful to them, because they think, actually, I can't quite find the answer to that. Well, that may be because it's a question that requires an inference. Okay, so we've talked about listening, and we've talked about, developing some listening skills and so on and so forth. And we've also talked about reading, and we've talked about how you might think about developing some reading skills. That list of tasks and skills which we saw for listening and reading is key information for teachers. Quite often, I think we focus a lot on the tasks, on what it is they need to do, but not looking always beneath the surface at the list of skills. So, in terms of sort of developing students' abilities, keep your eyes on on those lists of skills as well. And, in each lesson, we'd be looking to sort of have activities that are about building skills as well as just about building knowledge of the language. Okay, the language exists to be used for something, and this is these are the skills. Now, paper 2, as we mentioned, is a mixed skill, a mixed task paper, isn't it? So we've got reading at the beginning, and we've got writing and grammar tested also on the same paper. So we're going to have a look at the writing bit now. So there are 2 writing tasks and 1 grammar-based task. So again, we're with the 2 writing tasks, starting with the slightly easier one and moving on to the more challenging one. So there's a short writing task, which is the first writing task, and it's 60 to 75 words are recommended. And this includes 4 prescribed words or short phrases. And we'll have a look in detail at that in a moment. But those are words that students need to include in their answers. The longer writing task is recommended to be between 130 and 150 words. And students here have got a choice of 3 questions that come from different topics. And each question has 4 bullet points. And again, we'll look in a little more detail in a moment. And the final task on paper 2 is a grammar-based task, where candidates have to manipulate verbs and adjectives to fit into sentences. What happens is that there will be verbs and adjectives which are there in their unmarked form as an infinitive or as a masculine singular adjective. And students need to decide whether they stay as in that unmarked form, or whether they need to have a manipulation to put a particular ending on them to make them agree, if it's a verb, obviously with the subject of the sentence, and also with the time frame of the sentence. And if it's an adjective, obviously in terms of gender and number, with the noun that it describes. Now, we're only going to be testing verbs and adjectives, so there won't be other parts of speech that are tested there. And although this is a grammar-based task, it does also require an element of comprehension by students, because, for example, in order to identify maybe a time frame of a verb, they might need to pick up on the fact that somewhere else in the sentence we've got the word yesterday, and that means that we are into a past time frame, for example. So although it's a grammar-based task, it does also require contextual use of the grammar and an element of comprehension. So the skills really that are required in this part of the paper are to write for a variety of audiences, such as friends and acquaintances, teachers, family members, groups of professional bodies, to use a wide range of grammatical forms and structures, and to use a wide range of relevant and appropriate vocabulary. It's important to notice here that use of the word range. Okay, and what examiners are looking for is lots of variety, so that we don't have the same word, the same structure used over and over again. And so, for example, if on those longer writing tasks, one of the bullet points will ask them to do something where they use a past time frame, in demonstrating, that ability to use that past time frame really well, we might want to see, well, actually they can do it in the first person and the third person singular, and we might also have a first person plural, so a variety of persons of the verb, perhaps, and that also we haven't repeated the same verb lots and lots of times, because just saying I went doesn't necessarily show that you have that kind of ability to manipulate the past tense. That could just be that you've learnt something as almost as a vocabulary item. So for our more able students, we're looking to get that sort of range of grammatical forms, and also that we would have perhaps for the most able students, that we would have that wider range of tense forms, but also making sure that if we've got subordinate clauses, we have subjunctive and so on used appropriately and correctly, and also authentically written as well, not too shoehorned in. And we're also looking for this wide range of relevant and appropriate vocabulary. So again, just as you're sort of developing vocabulary, it's sometimes worth thinking about, as we've got there are certain key words that, I mentioned problem, problem can be replaced quite nicely with words like challenge or difficulty, and that widens the range of vocabulary so that we don't keep using the same words over and over again. Sometimes also developing students' kind of ability to think about what they produce in writing a little bit more widely can take them into a different area of vocabulary. So, for example, you've asked them to write about holidays. If everybody in the class writes about a beach holiday, you just get that same range of vocabulary. But actually, sometimes by developing that range by saying, well, actually, certain people are going to write about a beach holiday, you're going to write about a winter holiday, somebody else is going to write about going on a cruise, whatever it is we ask the students to do. Somebody else might do an adventure holiday, somebody's going to do a city break, shopping trip, whatever it is we ask students to do. By kind of manipulating those contexts, you will sometimes push them into new areas of vocabulary. And of course, they never know what they're going to get in the exam. So provided it's something that kind of comes from that list that we saw in terms of the themes and the sub-themes, the subtopics, provided the vocabulary fits there, that's what we would ask them to do. But just think about range, I think, and the extension of range. When we talk about things like grammatical forms, it might be a range of negatives, a range of different connectives, different ways to do a subordinate clause, and so on and so forth. So again, to find some practice writing tasks, you've got the SAMs and specimen papers. There will be the summer 23 papers, the past papers are there. Also have a look at GCSE writing papers, GCSE grammar presentations, and GCSE vocabulary practice activities. And there's also a link there to the TES teaching resources that you might find helpful for ideas. So let's just go back to the same thing that we were doing really with the listening and the reading, thinking about the possible activities that you might use to develop writing skills. I've already talked about a few things, but let's sort of have a look at some more ideas. So, for example, using reading texts to improve writing. So a reading text can be exploited to focus on an aspect of grammar, for example, verbs and tenses. So students could do things like allocate time frames to different parts of the text. They could identify specific verb forms within the text and then come up with, for example, the infinitive form or other tenses. That's a good activity, to go through and find the verbs and then put them into the infinitive. They could change the tenses of the verb. They could change the person. They could work from verb forms to create related nouns, adjectives, adverbs based on known language patterns. So that idea of the word family. And I would add in there things like antonyms as well, because, synonyms and antonyms can be useful things, again, for expanding that range of vocabulary. And, you know, even at a very sort of simple level, that bit of range, if I say it is easy, okay, I can say it is easy, but another way to say that it's not difficult. And just sometimes by doing things like it's never difficult, okay, and all of a sudden you feel that, don't you? You feel that so in very simple ways we can add that little bit of sense of linguistic control to what students write. So again, those synonymous phrases and antonymous phrases, not just synonyms and antonyms, but at phrase level, that can be a useful sort of activity to do, and all lifted from a text. And they might also want to identify and note some more complex structures. As we get students to do some analysis of text, and in fact, you know, take some of the texts from the sample assessments, from other GCSE level papers where the context is right, and use those and start looking at the features there, because they're the things that appear in reading are a good guide to what examiners might be looking for in writing. Actually, if we've got that particular phrase, we've got that particular bit of idiom, then those could be useful things. Interestingly, on the idiom as well, what sometimes I think people think that we're wanting phrases like raining cats and dogs and this sort of thing, but this is not really the case. When we talk about idiom, we're just looking at things that don't translate directly from English into the target language. So you know, those sort of things like je m'appelle is idiomatic, isn't it? Because that's not how you say it in English. Okay. Now we're going to have a little bit of a think now about paper 3, and we're going to have a think about speaking. So for speaking, there are 3 tasks, task A, B, and C, and these need to be conducted in consecutive order. So task A is a picture-based discussion, and students speak about a picture which they've previously selected, so they can choose them. But just be mindful, you know, that list of topics with subtopics with the asterisk, they're not allowed to choose a topic that goes in there. Okay, so they can select from any subtopic other than those 3. So they talk about the picture, and then task B and task C are conversations on topics. So it's a conversation on 2 topics which have not been specifically prepared, so that we can get some spontaneous response. We expect that students will have prepared and done lots of learning. And so when we say spontaneous, what we mean is that it's spontaneous response in the moment. So it isn't scripted or pre-learnt in that sense. They're not just doing this conversation from memory. But that's not to say that individual elements of the conversation will be anything particularly new to them, if that makes sense. So watch out for the spontaneity there. We'll say perhaps more about this further on. And for tasks B and C, there's a randomization grid which is provided by Pearson, and that determines which topics are to be examined in tasks B and C. And again, those subtopics where there's a potentially sensitive issue, those are not going to be assessed in tasks B and C. Okay, so we're not going to ask you to talk about things like role models, because potentially that's a sensitive issue. We don't know who people might talk about, and so we don't want to sort of take them into uncertain territory. And Now let's just have a look at so we've looked at the tasks. Let's just sort of think a bit about the skills that you need to be developing, because these are the things, these are, if you like, these are almost the skills are always the kind of the classroom activity, the basis for the learning outcomes of your lessons. So we're wanting students to describe the contents of a picture. We want them to describe possible past or future events related to people in the picture. We want them to respond to questions about the picture and its related topics, so starting with the picture and moving out from it. And we also want students to take part in a spontaneous conversation on two further topics. And I've said a little bit about spontaneity. The spontaneous doesn't mean that these are questions on topics that they've never heard before, that you haven't done some practice for in class. But it does mean that we mustn't have scripted or pre-learnt conversations where where the student just knows exactly what question is coming and exactly what they're going to say. The conversation needs to have spontaneity. And in each conversation, students need to develop their responses. They need to show initiative. They need to express and justify points of view, and they need to refer to past, present, and future events. Okay. So again, you might want to think about how students develop their responses. If they're talking about past narration, talk about something that happened in the past, it's not just me, it's also myself and somebody else. I did this, I went there, and my sister, my brother, my dad, they did something else. So perhaps just, thinking about moving away from just talking about first person, that will enable them to develop the ideas, but also to show that sort of range of grammar, for example. Students need to sort of show some initiative. That means that they kind of take the lead a little bit in those conversations. They need to express points of view, and they need to justify those points of view. And again, the points of view, okay, I like this because it's interesting, is a very simple opinion and justification. But, I like this for the most part, but sometimes I'm not quite sure if something, and so actually we could also have some more sophisticated justification of points of view. If you like, at the top end, a sort of sense of kind of thoughtful response. And of course, the past, present, and future events are something we need students to respond to. So again, then just having a look at, where you can find some practice speaking tasks. Again, we've got the SAMs and specimen papers. There's a GCSE image bank for speaking practice, GCSE example speaking conversation questions, GCSE picture-based task activities, GCSE conversation practice activities. And for international GCSE French, there are paper 3, there are exemplar responses as well. So you can actually listen to an example of what we would expect candidates to do. And you can find all of those things through the website. And some other useful websites are included there from the idealteacher.com and also from TES. So those links will be in the PowerPoint that will come out to you after the event today, or you may be able to download from the resources so that you can click through and you can find those things. So if we just now again do a little bit the same sort of thing that we were talking about previously, possible activities for speaking skills. So we're just picking up on particular skills. So we might want to do an activity like some target talk. So we pick some topics: sport, rural, 25 years ago, convenient, television, school, communication, books. And, you know, to what extent are young people dependent on the internet today? So there's our question. And actually, we've given those little sort of words in some boxes, and actually we can then say, well, actually, I want you to talk about that, but we're going to try and refer to at least four of those elements, for example. So you might say, well, you know, the internet's really important in school and education. Because it's very convenient, and it's replacing books in a lot of classrooms. And this was very different 25 years ago. And there we go. And so we can do that. And that actually, sometimes you could keep that same list of words, and you could change the question. So target talk activities can be useful. Another one then sort of is an activity which is with discussion cards. So student A, students who are designated A, they get cards related to a topic, and they have to talk to student B about what's on their card for example, for 4 minutes. So student B can then move on to the next student A. So they work around, okay? And so we give them some topics: recycling at home, renewable energy, saving energy, pollution in the town, fossil fuels, and so on and so forth. And so we kind of have that kind of movement around the classroom. So the A students have one particular type, and it's almost a bit like a sort of speed dating activity. But the discussion can be free flow, so we haven't necessarily, we're allowing spontaneity on the part of the students. So I'm going to just sort of say a few things now really about supporting transferable skills. So our transferable skills framework underpins the design of all Pearson Edexcel international qualifications and supporting resources across international GCSE and also international A-level. So what this does is it ensures that our assessments target the skills that students need for successful progression. And this is important. So the skills that we're building here in this international GCSE will be the skills that students will need at the next level if they're to do the international A-level, or indeed any A-level level qualification. And what it does then, it ensures that the assessments target the skills that the students need for this successful progression through. So, you know, you might think of the international GCSE as a 2-year course, but you could also think of it as the first 2 years of a 4-year international A-level course, if you want to look at it in that way. And this increases our support where these skills naturally occur through the teaching, learning, and assessment of the language. And Pearson materials and mapping also support you in identifying and developing the acquisition of these skills in students across the full curriculum. So the materials for international GCSE French, German, and Spanish are things that you can find on the website, and the links are there. And you'll also see the mapping and skills mapping documents. Okay, good. Now we're going to move on, and I'm going to talk a little bit about assessment now and exams. So just to say a few things about the assessment objectives. So assessment objectives are, assessment objective 1 is listening. So students need to understand and respond in writing to spoken language, and that's 25% of the assessment. Students need to be able to identify and note main points, extract specific details, identify points of view, recognize attitudes, emotions, and opinions, deduce the meanings of words in context, and show some understanding of familiar language. So those are the skills within that assessment objective. We've looked at some of those already, but in terms of thinking about lesson outcomes for listening activities that you do in class, actually the outcomes of the activities should fit into some of those categories. So we're going to do this activity, and this is about identifying the main points and identifying points of view. So keep those descriptors for the listening. It's very easy to think, oh, it's listening, but keep those ideas that describe that assessment objective at the heart of what you're doing, and that will help build the skills. Now, assessment objective 3 is reading, and this is assessment. This is AO3, and again 25%. And again, we've got very many of the same things that we saw there. But here, obviously, we're doing those things in the context of reading, identifying main points, extract details, identify points of view, recognize attitudes, emotions, and opinions, deduce the meaning of words from context, and show some understanding of familiar language. So assessment objective 2 is writing. And here we're expecting students to communicate in writing using register appropriate to the situation, showing knowledge of a range of vocabulary in common usage and of the grammar and structures prescribed in the specification. And it requires students to write for a variety of audiences, such as friends and acquaintances, teachers, families, members, groups, professional bodies, as we mentioned, and also use a wide range of grammatical forms and structures, and use a wide range of relevant and appropriate vocabulary. And again, as we mentioned, those are the sort of outcomes at whole qualification level, but also sort of micro level in your lessons for the writing activities. We can think, actually, what is the point of this lesson? What am I targeting here? And it needs to be some of those things that are kind of clearly indicated under those assessment objectives. And that's the point of the assessment objective. The assessment objective is the skills objective that we're expecting teachers to teach and to develop. And assessment objective 4 then is speaking. So this is about communicating in speech and showing knowledge of a range of vocabulary in common usage and of the grammar and structures prescribed in the specification, and also using them accurately. So students need to be able to describe the contents of a picture. They need to describe possible past and future events related to people in the picture. And that's, what do you think they're going to do next? What do you think they did? What have they just done? Students need to respond to questions about the picture and its related topic. So starting with the picture and moving outwards. Then we have that spontaneous conversation. We need to keep that word spontaneous in mind on 2 further topics. And of course, in each conversation, we need to develop responses, show initiative, express and justify points of view, and refer to past, present and future events. So again, in terms of sort of developing the skills, keep that list in mind, because it's a useful list in terms of actually, what am I going to do in this? How am I going to make this lesson useful and worthwhile? Well, actually, if you've given some opportunity and you've asked students to develop their responses, you maybe give them a simple response. Okay, I'm going to give you a 5-word answer to this question. I want you now just orally, spontaneously to make that 5-word into at least a 12-word response. Then actually we've given them that opportunity to develop their response. Or I'm going to give you some positive statements, and I'm going to ask you to put but on the end and give the alternative negative view, the opposite view. And again, that's all about, developing responses and so on. So these are really the sorts of skills that we need to be developing in our students. Now, I'm going to talk now a little bit about the exams themselves and about sort of approaches to marking, because I think it's quite important that we are clear about some of these things. In listening and reading, we are only testing comprehension. We're not testing the ability to produce accurate French, Spanish, or German. We test that in speaking and writing, so it's not ignored, but it's not tested in listening and reading. So correct spelling isn't a requirement as long as the student's response is comprehensible. Okay, so as long as in the context of the question that's been asked, the thing that they've actually written is an answer that a sympathetic native speaker could understand, and it's not ambiguous, then we're not too concerned. And an example, for example, in il s'appelle, if they've not got the right numbers of P's and L's in there, but actually if you read it out, it's pretty much the same word, that would be acceptable as an answer. Or if it's a Spanish example, if you've got tu with or without an accent, it's fine. That would be absolutely fine, because it's still comprehensible in the context. Now, the reading and listening papers are marked against a points-based mark scheme specific to that particular paper. What that means is that on the mark scheme, there will be a correct answer that is acceptable to examiners, and each correct answer effectively gets one mark. We also, I think it's worth just sort of pointing out that on reading and listening, on the mark schemes that are published and that will be published each summer, not every correct answer can be included. So examiners will use an element of judgment, and you can do that as a teacher as well. So if a student has answered and you think, actually, yes, that's a correct answer, but they've just worked that out in a slightly different way, then those answers are credited as well. So the approach to marking is always positive. We're never looking to withhold marks from students, either because they've not quite spelled something correctly or because they've expressed themselves in a slightly different way. But clearly, if there is evidence of understanding, if we've got good, solid evidence of comprehension, reading and listening, then they will be awarded the marks. So again, you can sort of apply that approach with reading and listening as you're teaching. We don't withhold marks for misspelling or anything like that. It's only testing comprehension. Those listening and reading exams are also marked by Pearson Edexcel examiners. So the students sit the paper exams. The paper exams are posted off to Pearson and are eventually scanned and are marked by examiners examiners mark on screen. It's worth just mentioning this as well for things like reading and listening, just for your students, make sure they cross out anything that they don't want marked. That's really important, because when we marked on paper in the past, we could see the difference between an answer in pencil and an answer in ink, but now not so much. So make sure that what they write is clear. But anyway, it's just to see there's no involvement of teachers in any of the marking at all. And for speaking and writing, they're marked against a set of assessment criteria which are published in the specification. On reading and listening, it's almost like one answer, 1 mark. For speaking and writing, they're marked against a set of descriptors, that describe performance. And so examples of that will come through each summer as the standard is exemplified. And again, it's all marked by Pearson Edexcel. So the writing paper is well, it's part of the reading paper as well. That's all sent off to be marked. The speaking as well, you're not required to mark or assess anything. So those speaking tests are simply recorded and they are uploaded. Your exams officer will know how to upload those. And they're marked remotely then by Pearson examiners. So again, those of you who might be coming from specifications where there's sort of coursework or teacher, there's extra work for you to do as teachers. You'll be pleased to know that there is no additional assessment work. Everything will be done by Pearson Edexcel. So just then on to sort of thinking a bit about the preparation. How do you prepare your students for exams? Well, for example, walking, talking mocks are a way to do some exam preparation. So we get students to sit in the same room where they'll do their exam, preferably in the same seats, and they're given an exam paper, which is as close to the real thing as possible. And then students are walked through every question on the paper. So the person who leads the session talks them through the smallest steps, such as underlining the keywords or how to plan or things to remember, etc. And students then write their responses in timed conditions, and they're told when to move on to each question. So we micromanage that process so that students have, and it will take longer than the real exam, because obviously you've got to talk them through each little bit, but we micromanage that process in order to embed those skills so that when students come to do their real exam, they know exactly what they have to do. Okay, now we're going to move on now. We're just going to have a look at some ways in which we can support you, and then we'll sort of take any questions and things that come out of today. And if you don't have questions today, you might have questions when we do the second session on Wednesday. So in terms of support, there's a list of kind of material which is available for helping you plan your teaching and learning, helping exam preparation and assessment, and also results support. So we've got a getting started guide, which all of these things you can find on the website. Training events, face-to-face and online. Well, you're in one of those now. Subject advisor support. Schemes of work, skills mapping, sample assessment materials, examiner reports as well. Once there are there's a body of live exam assessment, do make sure you read those examiner reports, because they are a good guide to you know, things that have been common issues across a number of centres, and that you start to sort of eliminate those problems from your own school by kind of picking up on those. And sometimes those things are skills related. Sometimes, for example, with the speaking test, there might be technical matters that the timings weren't observed, for example. So, you know, you would need to be making sure that you pick up on that, and you say, well, was that me? And again, if it's you, you know, it's a moment for reflective practice as well. We've got exemplar marked responses. There'll be past papers. There's Exam Wizard. Exam Wizard, have a look at that. That will enable you to pull together samples of assessment tests from past papers by picking on particular topics. You might be able to find all of the things to do with a particular topic area, and it enables you to quickly assemble those tests. There'll be obviously mark schemes. There's a results plus mock exam analysis that you can get, and there's also results plus. So there's results plus, you can do some, it will provide you with information to analyze your own mock exams, and also results plus the after the event one. in terms of the results support, you'll be able to see for your centre, for your school, which questions students did well on and which questions they did badly on. And again, it's a way to look at where there may be room for greater skills development, and so on. So you can look at your areas of strength, and it gives you that. It's quite nice to sort of celebrate those, but also to look at areas where you think maybe some further development is needed. And then there's access to scripts, the access to scripts service. You can actually have a look at what your get back the scripts and look at what your candidates actually did. So all of those things are available as support for teachers. Now, where do you find the free resources? So the website for each of the French, Spanish, and German specs are there, and you can find those, find all that stuff on the appropriate website. So make sure you kind of go in there, have a look in the specification, the course materials. One of the things as well, I'll just sort of mention, it's always if you're new to Pearson, there's just make sure you scroll down to the bottom, and it will quite often say show more. And so there are quite often things that the lists are very vertical, and so you sometimes find that there's more stuff to look at down at the bottom. So just do spend some time to do some exploration. Now, we'll just say a bit about support for exam preparation and post results. So we talked a bit about Results Plus, but this is a free online results analysis tool for teachers. So it provides you with a detailed breakdown of student performance in Pearson Edexcel exams. It's across all subjects, not just languages. So it just gives you that ability to identify topics and questions where a student could benefit from further learning, and also just to sort of think about your teaching strategies and approaches. And again, it sort of helps you to sort of benchmark your school's performance, your centre's performance against other Pearson Edexcel schools in your country. And it's not just a post results tool. The mock exam results can also be fed into the system to produce an analysis. So if you're, the student sat the paper, but you're going to use last year's paper as a mock, you can feed your results in and get that analysis back there as well. And you can find student results analysis as well from their previous Edexcel school. So, if the students moved, you can follow them through. And Results Plus Direct gives your students access to their final grades and performance breakdown, wherever they are as well. So just kind of check all of this out. And schools can sign up for a free Results Plus account in just a few quick and easy steps. And there's a link there. So if you'd like to, if you don't have it already, it's worth signing up for. Different schools will make a different use of that service, but it's worth exploring and having a look at it just to make sure that you are on board with whatever it is you might like to be doing. So if we think about Results Plus and how it works, the student takes the paper, the exam papers are scanned, examiners mark the papers online, and then the performance results are made available after results day, of course. Just a bit more information about Exam Wizard then. Exam Wizard is this free tool for teachers which helps you make quick homework assignments, topic tests, mock exams. Questions are tagged against unit, topic and assessment objective, or you can simply choose a whole past paper if you like. And you can use existing mark schemes for accurate marking. You can use the examiner report for insight. You can find the most recent exam content available, and you can also use the results to understand where students need more support. So again, investigate Exam Wizard if you haven't used it before. Lots of exam boards have similar things. This is nice at Pearson because it's free to use. and can be a useful additional resource for teachers. So just go on then to talk about access to scripts and the online portal. The access to scripts, again, it's a free online portal that enables you to immediately access electronically marked exam papers. So it provides this sort of enhanced transparency, and it offers you this sort of transparent approach to the marking process. One of the things, of course, about UK qualifications and generally is that there is nothing hidden, there is no secrecy. All of the information is available, and everything is transparent. And this is sort of part of that commitment that Pearson Edexcel have to the transparency and the consistency of the assessments. You can again also expect that the format of the assessment will be the same every year, so there will be no surprises to students sitting the exams. Should be no surprises to teachers when they look at what's been in that paper, how it works. It will work exactly as exemplified in the specification and in the sample assessment materials. But this access to scripts provides better understanding of marking before requests for inquiries about results are made. So, if you're not happy with a student's result, you can ask for that to be looked at. But actually, before you do that, have a look at the actual script, have a look at the actual situation, because the answer may be there for you. It may be evident whether you need to ask for that extra person to have another look or not. It provides also an excellent aid, I think, for teaching and preparing other cohorts for exams by helping you evaluate a student's performance on a particular question in relation to what they've been taught. And it's available instantly from Results Day for all our examination series for a defined window. You can view and download scripts which have been marked online free of charge from this self-service portal. So again, a nice, useful way just to sort of look at what your students have done. And also identify, skills areas. We talked a lot about those skills areas earlier on. Areas where you think some further development might be needed. Now, we've talked about a lot of all of the free stuff. There are also some additional. So we hope really we give you everything you really need free of charge. So it isn't just paying for the exam entry fee. The key support is all free to use, but there are of course some other resources that you might want to think about purchasing, and we do have curriculum matched student books with active books as well, so that there are, on the website you will see the other resources, the additional resources that you can help, and these are all about sort of planning, teaching and learning, and also exam preparation and assessment. So just to sort of think about Pearson publishing, Pearson publish accredited books for the course, and of course keep in mind that there are other publishers as well, so you're not absolutely required to have and use the Pearson books for this for teaching this specification, but we just make you aware that these materials are available. So these have sort of embedded transferable skills, so they're very good for progression into higher education and employment, and they're sort of designed to enable students to engage with the skills they're gaining. There are online teacher support materials. There's progression scale and mapping tools that give you sort of quick and easy formative assessment of students, so you can find the level that they're at and where they need to develop further. And they're also developed to support all learners. So they're not it's a 9-to-1 qualification from the most able student at international GCSE level down to the lowest performing student. They are sort of designed for there to be something there for everyone. And I suppose we should also mention our wonderful subject advisor for languages, who is Rebecca Waker. And you can contact her on teachinglanguages@pearson.com. And there's also a phone number. And she needs to be really, she's your kind of first line of contact for any kind of subject specific query. And there's I can promise you as well that they're incredibly responsive. Rebecca is the sort of senior team member, but there is a sort of team of people around. So any kind of query or question you have, even as a sort of something that's kind of left over from things we're talking about today, that's a really good place to go, to email that teachinglanguages@pearson.com, and or phone the number, and they will answer and they will get back to you to offer some support. Okay, now we're going to allow a little bit of time now for questions. I will sort of open up the chat. I'm just so, as I mentioned, I've talked an awful lot, so I just wanted to sort of go through now and have a look at any kind of questions. So somebody said, we're starting teaching international GCSE German this year. So far, our students have successfully taken the official German exams of the Goethe Institute, and we would like to get them for IGCSE. Okay, so these were all reasons for joining. I think what I'm going to do, if people have questions, would you like to sort of drop those into the chat now, and I'll do my best to answer. And if I can't answer them, we'll find you the answers a little bit further on. Are the students required to ask well, they're not required to ask questions, but it's a good idea if they do, because that's a good way to interact and to keep the conversation spontaneous. So I would recommend that they do ask, that you do get them to ask some questions, but in a sense, it's a nice to have rather than an absolutely essential bit. Okay, everybody pretty quiet. Right, well, I'll yes, somebody say what's the IGCSE level, the international GCSE level, compared with the common European framework of reference? And I think we're talking about B2, aren't we? Generally speaking, for that. I'll check that. Actually, we'll talk about yes, B2. I think it's sort of it's B, isn't it? I think it's sort of B1, B2. I think it's kind of there. It goes beyond the sort of the very basic, yeah. A2 B1. I think that's about right. I think that sounds about right. Yes, yes, most B1. Obviously, it stretches, you see, across a range of grades. So what the students can do at grade 1 is not the same as what we'd expect at grade 9. Okay, well, I'll say I think we're kind of at the end of what we need to do today. So, I mean, thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found it useful. It's a fast run through, and I think we do it all again on Wednesday with uh, a bit more detail. So if there are people who are back, then it'd be nice to see you again. Um, but I'll stay around if you have further questions. I'll pick them up. But otherwise, thanks ever so much for your time this morning, and we hope you found it useful anyway.